Hey, science peeps, welcome to the end of week 5 of remote learning. So we finished chapter 1, lesson 1, and we're moving on to chapter 1, lesson 2. There's going to be a big project at the end of chapter 1 about cells, so pay close attention. All right, so you're going to go to your Google Classroom and you're going to click at the top where it says May 24th through May 5th. So chapter 1, lesson 2 is a big lesson. Okay, so you're going to click on this and you're going to see, I tell you the pages that all the activities are on, but as long as you follow the dates, you'll be fine. There's a bunch of documents on the side here, so I'll walk you through which ones to hit. But again, if you just hover over each picture, each document, it'll tell you the name. So then it shouldn't be too hard for you to figure out which one to do. All right, so you're going to click on this and it's going to bring up our hyperdoc for the day. So today, April 24th, we are going to just be working on this first page and we're going to learn about the different organelles in the cell. So you can go ahead and click this link if you want, or just look at my screen to help you with your answers. And, anytime you can go and pause my video, go back and look at the workbook pages as well. All right, so today we are going to complete pages 13 through 19 of our workbook, figures 1, 2, maybe 3, and 4. And then there's another activity at the bottom of that before you turn it in. Okay, and that is your individual practice grade today. So let's get started with that. Okay, so if you go to, I'm going to come back here. If you go to today, we're going to be doing this one, this Google Doc. It is called Chapter 1, Lesson 2, Looking Inside Cells. So click on that doc and it comes up with this. So if you had your workbook, you would have been coloring things in, but since we don't have it, we're just going to make some modifications to that. I have 2 of these up, so I'm going to close that one. Okay. So let's start with, and I have the workbook pages on my Google Slides here. So these slides are available in all of the lessons. So anytime you can just click on these slides and they're available to you. Okay, so let's start with one of the most basic organelles in the cell membrane. And this is the answer, or we're going over for figure 1. So the cell membrane, if you take a look right here, it controls the substances that pass into and out of a cell. So remember last lesson, we talked about the things that a cell or an organism need to take in and the things that they need to let out. So cells need food and water and oxygen. That's what they take in, and that's what passes through the cell membrane. And then out of the cell membrane goes waste products, carbon dioxide, and excess water. So this is a 2-dimensional picture. If you could imagine a ball, okay, like a sphere, the whole outside, the whole outer covering of that sphere is the cell membrane. But what we see in pictures is 2-dimensional. This is an actual picture right here of a cell membrane. You can see this thin little layer here. Okay, and this is for an animal cell. And then that's the outside of the cell over there. So let's take a look. Figure 1 says, it says use a colored pencil to shade in the cell membrane. But when we go over to our activity, I wrote, where is the cell membrane located? So what we're going to write down is located on the outside of the cell. Okay, so it's that whole outside. All right, so let's move on to figure 2. And we're going to go on to our next slide here. Now, animal cells have a cell membrane. Plant cells, what make them different is that they also have a cell membrane, but they have a cell wall. Okay, animal cells do not have a cell wall. So what is a cell wall? A cell wall is a rigid layer that surrounds the cell. So first you'll have the cell membrane, and then outside of the cell membrane is the cell wall. And the cells of animals, like I just said, do not have a cell wall, and the cell wall helps protect and support the cell. So, a plant is outside. Let's say we have a lot of rain. The cell wall protects this individual cells from bursting. That's one of its main functions. So it keeps that cell stronger. If an animal cell were to take in too much water, it could burst, it could pop. So that is a big difference here because plants are outside and they can be exposed to a lot of water. They have to have that added protection there, among other things. But that's one of the big reasons that plants have that. Okay, so we're moving on to figure 2 now. And we're going to talk about a couple more organelles, the nucleus, the mitochondria, the nucleolus, and ribosomes. There are a lot of organelles inside each cell. So the nucleus is the large oval structure that is the control center. So it's like it tells the cell what to do. It's the brain of the cell. All right, so here, this is the nucleus. Okay, so now inside, you'll see this little bluish purple indigo type color. That is the nucleolus. So I'm going to skip down to the bottom here. And so the nucleolus, which is inside the nucleus, is where the ribosomes are made. So what are ribosomes? Ribosomes are tiny little, they look like little circles, little dots, and they produce proteins, substances that are very important to cells for the cells to function. Okay. So now floating in inside the cell also are something called a mitochondria. And the mitochondria is the energy producer of the cell. They convert stored energy in food to energy that the cell can use to do its everyday functions. Okay, so now if we go down here, it says, what does the nuclear envelope do? So we didn't read that part yet. The nuclear envelope is up here in this paragraph with nucleus. So it says, notice in figure 2 that the nucleus is surrounded by a membrane called the nuclear envelope. Okay, so it's like kind of like the cell membrane of the nucleus, if you will. So it says materials pass in and out of the nucleus through pores in the nuclear envelope. Okay. So what does the nuclear envelope do? It allows materials to pass in and out of the nucleus. So we're going to go here to our answer for figure 2. We're going to write the nuclear envelope allows materials to pass in and out of the nucleus. Okay. That's part of figure 2. There's a little bit more to answer here. It says, challenge question, in what types of cells would you expect to find a lot of mitochondria? So now remember, the mitochondria is the energy, it produces the energy of the cell. So if you think about your body, what, I guess, tissue or what part of your body needs the most amount of energy to function? So you might think, oh, okay, my heart needs a lot of energy. When I walk, when I run, when I play sports, I need a lot of energy. So what is working there? So what's working are your muscles, and your heart's a muscle too. It's a very special kind of muscle. So your muscles, you would expect to see a lot of mitochondria in your muscles. So we're going to write that down. Good. My teeth. Cannot type and talk at the same time, obviously. So just bear with me when I type here. Okay. So now our next part, if you look on, there's actually more to figure 2. If you had your book, you would see it's right on the next page. Where I'm going to show you some pictures and talk a little bit about some more organelles before we finish up figure 2. So here's a very close-up picture of a nucleus. Okay, so this is the nucleus itself. This is the nucleolus in here. Now, something we didn't talk about yet, but that's the DNA. So all this white material is the DNA, okay? And that's also located inside the nucleus. And the DNA, this is why the nucleus is the brain of the cell, because the DNA codes the cells and tells them what to do. Because we have different kinds of cells. We have muscle cells, we have nerve cells. So these different cells do different things, and the DNA tells the cell, codes the cell, and tells it what it should be doing. Okay. We're going to get on to this next organelle called the endoplasmic reticulum next. You can see all these little squiggly lines around the nucleus. That's it. So sometimes it's called the ER for short, but the endoplasmic reticulum is a network of membranes that produces many substances. So we talked about how the ribosomes are produced inside the nucleus by the nucleolus, but they're only partially made in the nucleolus. Okay, so they're sent out of the nucleus to the ER. And in the ER, those ribosomes finish making those proteins that the cells need to survive. So here we can see these little black dots, and they're on these squiggly lines. Okay, so here's the nucleus, and then the ribosomes are on the ER, and the ER is helping it finish up its production of those proteins. And then once it's done, it's going to send it to another organelle so that they can be sent, these ribosomes can be sent around the cell. It's really complicated what each individual cell does. It's pretty amazing. We never even have to think about this. Our bodies just naturally, automatically do that, and because the DNA codes the cells to do this. All right, next we have an organelle called cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is all the fluid in the cell. So all of these organelles that we're talking about are just floating around in the cytoplasm. And the cytoplasm is important because this is how the organelles move around the cell. They can float, they move throughout the cell in this fluid. It's a clear fluid, so usually you just see all the organelles. All right, so next we talked about the mitochondria. I'm sorry, we did a little bit talk about the mitochondria. So the mitochondria is called the powerhouse of the cell. It converts stored energy into food energy so that the cell can do its functions, because in order to do anything, you need energy. So the mitochondria is like, it feeds the cell. And if you look at it up close right here, you can see it's like an oval shape, and it has these little squiggly lines in it. And then here, if you take a look at it from a distant version, the mitochondria are here. You can kind of see those little squiggly lines from the distance. Here's the nucleus right here. Okay. We talked about, let's see here, the ER. So we have the ER throughout the cell too. But right here with these little squiggly lines are the mitochondria. All right, so next up, this is actually the rest of figure 2, believe it or not. So the next one says, what do ribosomes do? Okay, so the answer to that question that we learned from the other page is that ribosomes make proteins. That is the big function of the ribosomes. So then we can just hit enter and we can write ribosomes make proteins. Everything spelled correctly. Woo! Okay. So we're actually going to move on to figure 4 next. We're going to skip figure 3 for now. Okay, so figure 4, we're going to talk about the Golgi apparatus. So it's like a fill-in. So it says the Golgi apparatus is an organelle that blank and blanks materials made in the blank. Okay, so just keep that in mind. So here it says, as proteins leave the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum, that's the ribosomes for one, where those proteins are finished being made. They move into a structure that looks like a flattened set of tubes, okay, shown here. And this structure can be thought of as the cell's warehouse. The Golgi apparatus receives proteins and other newly formed materials from the ER, packages them, and distributes them to other parts of the cell or to outside the cell. So those ribosomes, for example, let's follow the path of the ribosome, because they make those important proteins. After they're finished being made in the ER sends them to the Golgi apparatus. The Golgi apparatus puts them in these little bubbles, it packages them, and it sends them out through the cytoplasm. They float around in the cytoplasm, and it provides proteins that are important for the cell to function. So we're going to rewrite this. Okay. All right, so we're going to recopy this line. The Golgi apparatus is an organelle that, okay, so let's go over here. The Golgi apparatus is an organelle that packages and distributes. Packages and distributes. Let's go back. Materials made in and those materials, they go to the Golgi apparatus. You can just write the abbreviation. You don't have to write the full endoplasmic reticulum unless you really want to. Okay, so now let's go back to our slides. I have some more pictures to show you. So this is what a Golgi apparatus would look like. Okay, here's another picture of it, like these wavy lines back and forth. Okay, and so in here, and you can see here, it's packaging things and sending them out. Packaging things and sending them out. Okay, so now let's talk about vacuoles. Now, I want you to keep in mind that some animal cells have vacuoles and some don't. So it's not every animal cell does not have a vacuole, but all plant cells do. So in this picture, I'm going to show you an animal cell, and this one does have vacuoles. Okay. So a vacuole stores water, food, or other materials needed by the cell. Vacuoles can also store waste products until the wastes are removed from the cell. Okay, so just depending on the kind of cell in the animal, they may or may not have vacuoles. However, let's go to the next slide. And you can tell that this is an animal cell. I asked the question, plant or animal cell, because look at the shape. The shape of this cell is round. So remember, animal cells are round and plant cells are squarish, roundish, squarish. So now this is definitely a plant cell. And here's how you can tell. They all have this vacuole. It's called the large central vacuole, and it stores water. So when plants absorb water, this whole big space is filled. And so that's how you can tell the difference. If you look at this picture, you don't really see this, this huge open space inside of it like this. That's a very big space. Okay. So this is definitely a plant cell because it's like squarish. It has edges. All right. So now speaking of plant cells, let's talk about chloroplasts. So chloroplasts, and this is why plants are green, or most leaves of plants are green, is because the chloroplasts, they're the thing that captures the energy from the sun and converts that energy into food for the plant cell, kind of like the mitochondria do for animal cells. And they have these little layers of other. So inside the organelle, it's even more complex. There's more things inside of each of those little organelles inside each cell. So I'm going to play you this video. I'm not going to watch the whole thing, but it's a very brief video, but it's just showing you here. These are the chloroplasts. They're floating around in the cytoplasm. Okay. And so I know we can't really see a bunch of other cells, but you can see the rectangular square shape of the cell, and then the green. That green is a big, flashing light should go off. That is a plant cell. All right. So now let's go back to lysosomes. So lysosomes are found in animal cells. They break down food particles into smaller ones. And they can also break down old parts of the cell. Sometimes organelles in the cell, they have run their course and new parts of those organelles are made or cells die. And the lysosomes will package those and send them out of the cell. So they're kind of like the recycling center of the cell. So I know here we have these words peroxisome. We're not going to really learn about peroxisomes, but right here, it's round, Okay, a lot of things around in the cells, huh? And that's a lysosome. Okay, so now here's the big picture. If you take a look at this cell, this is one cell. And in our bodies, we have trillions of cells. So it's just an amazing thing that happens in our body every single day, what our cells do. So here's the nucleus. The nucleolus is in here with the DNA. Don't forget the nuclear envelope that surrounds the nucleus. And then we have ribosomes being made in here and sent out to the ER. The ER finishes making those ribosomes, the proteins in them, and sends them out to the Golgi apparatus, which packages them and sends them out into the cell, into the cytoplasm. Here we have mitochondria converting energy into food for the cell. And we have our cell membrane that's all around the cell. It's a really complex system here, the cell. Okay, so now on to figure 3. I'm actually not going to have you do figure 3. So you can write here, see our slides for this one. I guess PowerPoint's one word, my bad. Okay, because there's an awful lot of writing to do. Again, if you had your workbook, I would have made you do this activity. But what you're doing here is just you're defining each of these organelles that we literally just talked about. So if you want, you can pause the screen. You can always refer back to it, what these definitions for all of these organelles are. Another really important thing on the screen is this little box here. And you're actually going to do an activity that's going to require you to fill a box in, a chart in like this. And what it does is it names all of the different organelles up top here. And then the checks are they in plant cells or animal cells? So like, for example, okay, and it's okay if you pause the screen and go to your activity. The second activity here is to put an X in the box for each structure that is present in plant and animal cells. So, for example, the cell wall. Do plant cells have a cell wall? Do animal cells have a cell wall? So, what we're going to do is I'm going to do the first couple with you. Yes, plant cells have a cell wall. Animal cells do not, so leave that blank. Now, let's talk about cell membrane. Plant cells do have a cell membrane. And animal cells also have a cell membrane. So plant cells have these two structures while animal cells just have that one structure. Another one I want to make sure I go over with you are the vacuoles, okay? Vacuoles, we said that some animal cells have them. So what I'm going to tell you to do is to leave that one blank. When you go up here to plant cells, definitely X that off because you have those large central vacuoles. Feel free to go back and look at this slide again to see what you should be checking off and not checking off. Because when we do our end of the chapter project, this is going to come in really handy for you. Okay, so now let's go back to our HyperDoc. We finished this. So once you finish that chart and putting your X's in, you can turn in your doc. You're good with that. What I want you to do is to go to this website, Legends of Learning. I don't know if you've used it in your other classes. Some of you might have, but what you're going to do, and I have step-by-step instructions here, click the link under Students. So once you click on this hyperlink, you're going to click the link under Students, and then you're going to select Play Teacher Playlist. Okay, so there's a code you have to enter, and it's the same code as my Science World, CG333. If you don't already have an account, then what you're going to do is I want you to please select Sign Up and then select Sign Up with Google. So make sure you're selecting your Hamilton Google email address. Okay, so then once you do that, you're going to select the assignment named Chapter 1, Parts of a Cell, and then Plants versus Animal Cell. So I want you to pay close attention because you're going to play. This is a really fun interactive site. Which organelles go in a plant cell, which go in an animal cell. Again, if you didn't turn in your Google Doc, make sure you finish that up. And then you have an optional activity to play this interactive plant and animal cell game. It's really more an informational game than a playing game, but it can help you learn your organelles better if you have some extra time. Okay, that is it for me. Um, Email me or message me on Google Classroom if you have any questions. And I will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. CG out.